There was a cow chewing on the windshield wiper of a pearl-white luxury SUV, and nobody knew why it was there. That's how the video began. I stood there frozen between bales of hay and a bewildered auctioneer as the crowd laughed and mooed and pointed their phones at the Range Rover that wasn't supposed to be part of today's livestock bidding. You could hear someone shout $500 for the cow hauler and someone else yell, "That thing got heated seats for my goats." But rewind a day earlier, and you'd find me at the edge of a total breakdown because of the very woman who owned that SUV. Her name was Karen, and she'd parked in my loading zone for the third time this month like she owned the whole street. And when I asked her politely to move it because I had 1,200 pounds of livestock feed en route on a deadline, she looked me dead in the eyes, sipped from her ridiculous pink smoothie cup, and said maybe you people should just carry it around her car next time. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "Sure thing, ma'am." That was the last polite sentence I said to her. My family's feed store had survived 2 recessions, a pandemic and a tornado that knocked out power for 9 days straight. But it couldn't survive another delay on a Friday morning delivery. The stuff we were getting, pellets, hay blends, supplements, was already paid for by customers picking it up that afternoon. The livestock industry runs on precise timing, and one missed truck doesn't just lose a customer. It loses a farmer's trust. So when Karen's SUV was blocking our only loading access and my delivery driver called saying he couldn't unload and had to reroute or risk getting cited for obstruction, I had 2 choices. Move her car myself and risk a lawsuit or call in a favor. I chose option 3. Revenge. See, Karen had a history. She was the kind of woman who parked diagonally across 3 compact spots at Whole Food. The kind who once yelled at a delivery guy because his dolly made noise near her yoga class. She wore sunglasses indoors and claimed to have gluten allergies but only on weekdays. And she had one obsession that I knew would be her undoing: image. Every week she visited a boutique down the street, strutted around like she owned the block, and left her overpriced SUV right in front of my store, daring anyone to challenge her. I had tried everything. Note, signs, complaints, even a warning that we had the area zoned for towing. But Karen would laugh and say, "I know the mayor's sweetheart," and walk off like she was royalty. The last time she did it, she left a post-it that read VIP parking for real citizens and taped it to our feed bin. So when my buddy Cole, who ran a towing company that handled farm equipment and oversized vehicles, came by later that day, I told him everything. And he said 6 words that lit the fuse inside my head: "You ever heard of cow auctions?" At first I thought he was joking. But he wasn't. That weekend just outside of town was the state's biggest livestock auction. The lot it was held on doubled as a temporary vehicle storage site for overflow equipment. A few tow-ins wouldn't raise eyebrows. They even had a policy that unclaimed vehicles sitting for more than 24 hours got roped off as display material for charity bidding. It wasn't theft. It was just really bad luck for the owner if they didn't read the signs. Karen wasn't the type to read signs. We hatched the plan over barbecue that night. Karen would park like she always did. We'd call in Cole's tow truck. He'd reroute her car to the livestock auction lot. And we'd let nature, cows, and local curiosity take care of the rest. I wasn't out to destroy her car or harm anything. Just teach her a lesson. Show her what happens when you treat people like dirt. We even checked the legal boxes. Signs were posted. Tow was justified. Her vehicle wasn't damaged. And we made sure the auction crew knew it wasn't for sale. That part. Well, it got a little out of hand. Friday morning arrived like it always did. I arrived early, pretending to sweep the sidewalk while watching the street. At 9 a.m. sharp, Karen's SUV turned the corner like a white shark looking for prey. She didn't even hesitate. She rolled right into the red-zoned loading space, cranked up some kind of loud EDM remix of whale sounds, and stepped out wearing sunglasses the size of frying pans and a fur vest in May. She walked right past me and said, "Don't scratch my car with your little farm toys." Then she vanished into the boutique. I waited 5 minutes just to be sure. Then I called Cole. The truck arrived 5 minutes later. Slick, silent, efficient. His team had her SUV up and gone in less than 4 minutes. By the time Karen returned, sipping another one of her 1,000-calorie smoothies and scrolling Instagram, the space was empty. She blinked, looked around, then checked her phone. I heard her say aloud, "Hum must have set it on autopark." She walked to the boutique's back alley thinking maybe her car moved itself. For the next 20 minutes, she wandered the block with increasing confusion. I played dumb the whole time, even offered to help her search. When she asked if I'd seen it, I just shrugged and said, "You know, these modern cars sometimes drive off on their own." By noon, Karen called the cops to report a missing vehicle. But they told her it had been towed under local ordinance. They even gave her the location. She demanded someone come get her and drive her there. But her assistant was out of town. Her Uber app wouldn't connect. So she ended up begging a stranger with a pickup to take her to the livestock grounds. I don't know what she expected. A polite welcome, maybe a quick form to sign. What she walked into was a full-scale county auction, dozens of farmers in overalls, animals in pens, kids running around with corn dogs, and, smack in the middle of it all, her Range Rover parked beside a prize goat with a sign taped to it that said Lot 38 Urban Cow Wagon. I wasn't there in person, but someone sent me video. You couldn't script it better. Karen screaming. A goat licking her tire. The auctioneer joking, "First vehicle I've ever seen with a backup camera and cow manure in the same package." She tried to yank the door open, but the locks had been disabled temporarily by Cole's team for security. She waved her arms like a malfunctioning windmill and shouted, "I will sue every single person here." Meanwhile, bids were still being shouted out by a few ranchers who thought it was a novelty act. One guy asked if it came with preloaded Taylor Swift albums. The video went viral within hours. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Because I knew Karen. She wouldn't let it go. She'd find a way to spin it or lash out. But what she didn't know was that her public meltdown had just begun. And by the end of it, the whole county would know what happens when you block a feed truck and mess with the wrong farm boy on the wrong morning. The moment Karen's Range Rover was hauled away to the auction yard, I felt an odd mix of relief and anticipation. Relief because I finally reclaimed the loading zone that she had turned into her personal parking spa. Anticipation because I knew that what happened next would either make me a local legend or get me chased down by a woman armed with high heels and an entitlement complex. I wasn't entirely sure which outcome excited me more. What I did know was that the real fun hadn't even started yet. The auction was the stage. Karen was the show. And I was backstage pulling the curtain just wide enough to let the drama spill out for the world to see. After the tow truck left, I checked in with Cole to make sure everything was going smoothly. He confirmed that her car was parked exactly where we discussed, just behind a pen of dairy calves and beside a rusty old hay shredder. He even texted me a photo. There it was. White Range Rover, spotless and smug-looking, now surrounded by grass stains and farm dust like a designer purse dropped into a hog pen. It looked completely out of place, and that was the beauty of it. Cole added that the auction crew found it hilarious. One of them printed a fake label that said Lot 38. Urban Cow Wagon and slapped it on the windshield with duct tape. That wasn't my idea, but I wasn't about to stop them. The plan was unfolding better than I imagined. Meanwhile, Karen was doing what Karen does best, panicking in a way only someone with zero self-awareness can. She had stormed into the boutique demanding their Wi-Fi password because her GPS app glitched and didn't show where her car was. She accused one of the clerks of conspiracy, tried to blame me again, and even told a teenager outside the store that she might be the victim of political harassment. Eventually, she found a ride with a local handyman who happened to be finishing his breakfast sandwich out front. Poor guy didn't know what he was getting into when she asked, or rather ordered, him to drive her to the auction yard. The ride must have been uncomfortable because by the time she arrived, her face was redder than the auctioneer's suspenders. The moment her eyes landed on her car surrounded by livestock, the screech she let out startled several goats and made a pig urinate on itself. People at the auction turned to see what the fuss was, and Karen marched straight toward her car like she was storming the beach at Normandy. She didn't even notice she was stepping through cow dung and hay. Her high heels weren't built for this kind of terrain, and each step looked like a battle between her dignity and gravity. She waved her arms and demanded someone get the auctioneer. He came over, chewing sunflower seeds, and asked calmly if she was there to bid. She shouted that her vehicle was stolen, paraded, and mocked, and that he would be hearing from her lawyers. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, if you're not here to bid or sell, I suggest you step away from the livestock." The irony of that moment wasn't lost on anyone. Her white SUV, still looking too clean for the dusty setting, now had 2 goats sniffing the tires and a hen pecking at the side mirror. She kept demanding someone help her, but the sheriff's deputy on site reminded her that the tow was perfectly legal. She had parked in a red loading zone, signs were clearly posted, and the tow yard had merely placed the vehicle at their legally designated overflow lot, which happened to be the auction venue for the weekend. Karen kept yelling it's not funny, and the more she said it, the more people laughed. Back at the store, I was refreshing my phone like an addict watching the video blow up. Someone at the auction had uploaded a clip to social media. The video showed her yelling about her rights while a goat walked up behind her and headbutted her ankle. The caption read, "Even the livestock can't stand her." Within an hour, it had 10,000 views. By evening, that number tripled. Local radio stations were already talking about it. One guy called in and said I was there, and she threatened to sue the chickens. That line alone got replayed so many times that a local band remixed it into a jingle. Karen, however, didn't go quietly. Once she finally recovered her car, after signing paperwork and listening to a half-hour safety lecture from the auction manager about not yelling near the pigs, she made a beeline back to my store. She burst in like a hurricane with bad hair and rage in every fiber of her overpriced scarf. She pointed at me and said, "You think this is funny?" I said, "Honestly, it's the funniest thing I've ever seen." She demanded an apology, threatened to report me to City Hall, and vowed legal action. I told her she was free to do whatever she pleased, but maybe consider parking in legal spots going forward. She accused me of harassment and claimed she had PTSD from livestock noises. A customer nearby snorted and said, "Lady, you're lucky the bull wasn't in heat." She left in a fury, tires screeching, but not before taking a photo of my store sign, my face, and a bag of feed as if that was going to help her in court. What she didn't know was that the incident had made her a local celebrity, for all the wrong reasons. People started coming in just to ask if the story was real. Kids asked where the goat was that attacked Karen. Someone even brought me a cupcake with cow sprinkles and said thanks for doing the Lord's work. A neighboring farmer offered to paint a mural of the scene on his barn. But I didn't let the attention distract me. Karen was unpredictable, and I knew this wasn't over. If she couldn't win by complaining, she'd find some petty angle to exploit. I double-checked with Cole that every step of the tow was documented. We had receipts, time-stamped photos, footage from 2 cameras, and signed acknowledgement. Everything was by the book. But people like Karen don't believe in books unless they're using them to hit someone. I braced myself for the next phase. She might go to the media. She might call lawyers. She might show up with some weak HOA petition demanding I be evicted from the town I was born in. Whatever came next, I was ready. Then something I didn't expect happened. A local journalist emailed asking for an interview. Not about Karen, but about creative small business owners using humor to deal with daily frustrations. Apparently, my story struck a nerve across the state. People were tired of being pushed around by rude customers and egotistical neighbors. They wanted to hear from someone who stood up without throwing punches. I agreed cautiously. The article went live 2 days later with the title "The Feed Store Owner Who Sent an SUV to a Livestock Auction and the World Applauded." Karen's face wasn't even shown. But readers knew. They always knew. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. This was about boundaries, respect, and the power of standing your ground without shouting. Karen had messed with the wrong man on the wrong morning, and as the views climbed and the jokes spread, it became clear that I hadn't just gotten my loading zone back. I'd turned it into the most famous plot of concrete in the county. The auction grounds were alive with noise, dust, and the chaotic energy only a crowd of farmers, ranchers, and livestock can produce. Kids were chasing chickens, ranchers were haggling over the price of a prized bull, and in the middle of it all, standing awkwardly between a rusted tractor and a pen of prize-winning lambs, was a white Range Rover wearing a duct-taped label that read Lot 38. Karen's SUV looked like a UFO had crash-landed into a barnyard. The chrome rims sparkled like they were mocking everything around them. And the crowd? They loved it. Some thought it was a joke, others thought it was part of a charity gimmick, and at least one guy genuinely believed it was a new hybrid vehicle that ran on corn ethanol and Bluetooth arrogance. The auctioneer, a man named Dale who'd seen just about everything in his 30 years of calling bids, was having a field day. He stood on his podium, mic in hand, and with a grin said, "We've got a special one today, folks, a real showstopper, a Range Rover with all-terrain pretension and built-in entitlement." The crowd roared with laughter. He kept going, describing it like it was bred in a climate-controlled garage and raised on a strict diet of boutique coffee and GPS errors. A few of the farmers joined in, shouting pretend bids. One yelled 2 goats and a tractor tire. Another shouted 3 chickens and a handshake. Dale pretended to take it seriously, going once, going twice, just as Karen stormed into the chaos. She looked like a soap opera villain dropped into a rodeo. Her scarf flapped behind her like a cape, and her heeled boots sank an inch with every step into the soft auction yard ground. The moment her eyes locked on her vehicle, she lost it. She pushed through a group of kids laughing at a pig that had climbed onto a hay bale and marched toward her SUV like a woman possessed. People stepped aside, sensing the collision of worlds about to happen. A woman from the food stand muttered, "Here comes the tornado," and backed up holding her corndog like a microphone. Karen began shouting over the noise, demanding someone stop the auction. She pointed at the auctioneer and yelled, "You can't sell my car, it's theft, it's kidnapping, it's emotional terrorism." Dale, without missing a beat, adjusted his mic and said, "Ma'am, the livestock don't seem emotionally disturbed. Maybe your SUV could use therapy." The crowd erupted. A goat bleated. Somewhere behind her, someone started filming again. Karen stomped to the SUV and pulled at the door handles, but Cole's crew had already done their job securing the vehicle. The keys were with the lot office, and the battery had been disconnected temporarily to prevent alarm triggers. At that point, a sheriff's deputy who was working part-time security approached. He asked Karen to calm down. She exploded at him too, ranting about legal violations, pain and suffering, and how she was going to have this entire event shut down. The deputy calmly asked for ID, and explained the situation to her for what must have been the 3rd time that day. "Ma'am, your car was legally towed. It was placed here because the tow company uses this lot during auction weekends. It's safe. Nobody is selling it. We even have footage from downtown showing you parked illegally again." Karen didn't care. She kept shouting that she was being framed, that this was a setup, and she even accused the auctioneer of being in a conspiracy against suburban women. That's when the goat stepped in again. Literally. As Karen leaned against the hood of her car, one of the more curious goats ambled up and began licking the bumper. Karen shrieked like it had bitten her and demanded the animal be restrained. The auctioneer leaned into his mic again and said, "Folks, this SUV comes with a built-in goat polishing system. Bidding starts at a dozen eggs and a restraining order." Laughter exploded across the grounds. Karen was seething. She tried to record a video on her phone, but in her panic, all she managed was a blurry clip of the goat sniffing her tire and her yelling I'm a victim over and over. The auction paused briefly as staff stepped in to officially confirm the vehicle wasn't for sale and never was. But the damage was already done. Social media had picked up the video someone posted earlier, and by the end of the hour, it had gone from local funny incident to statewide viral sensation. Memes started flooding the internet. One had her SUV with cartoon horns drawn on the roof and the caption "Beware the Karen mobile it charges." Another had Dale the auctioneer edited onto a dollar bill with the words "In Goat We Trust." Someone even made a remix using Karen's screech mixed with country banjo beats and dubbed it Karen at the county rodeo. Back at my store, I watched the entire thing unfold through updates from friends at the auction and a live stream that one of the attendees had set up. I didn't laugh as much as I thought I would. I smirked, sure, and there were moments of pure satisfaction, but what I felt more than anything was vindication. She had ignored every sign, every warning, and every shred of decency. She'd treated the loading zone like her birthright, my business like an obstacle, and my employees like furniture. Now she was in the exact place where her self-image couldn't protect her. And the funniest part was it hadn't cost her a dime in damages. Just her pride, which was clearly the most valuable thing she owned. Later that day, Karen finally recovered her car after speaking with Cole's dispatcher, who had to walk her through the paperwork and verify her ID. She drove off in a cloud of fury and dust, leaving behind a crowd still chuckling and a rooster that had taken a particular interest in her tire tracks. I knew she wouldn't let this go quietly. She'd either escalate it or try to spin it in her favor. But what I didn't know yet was that she'd soon try to turn the entire town against me. By sundown, Karen had launched her own counterattack in the only way she knew how: performative online rage. She posted a 5-paragraph rant on her HOA's community page, blaming me for emotional distress, alleging that the entire incident was a coordinated attack on her social status, and even implying that rural citizens were jealous of people with refined taste. Her post ended with the line, "I am not the enemy, I am the lesson this town need." Unfortunately for her, she underestimated just how much the community adored that lesson. Comments rolled in faster than she could delete them. Someone replied with the video link. Others added goat emojis and tagged friends. A retired teacher commented, "I wish you'd parked in my spot back in '09, I'd have driven you straight into the 4-H tent." The post turned into a battlefield of sarcasm, puns, and photoshopped edits of Karen's SUV with hay bales strapped to the roof. Eventually, she disabled comments, but screenshots had already spread everywhere. She had lost control of the story, and in trying to make herself the hero, she made herself the punchline. It didn't take long for Karen's humiliating meltdown at the livestock auction to grow legs and start sprinting across every social media platform. By Sunday morning, just 2 days after her luxury SUV had been parked next to goats and auctioned off in jest, the clip of her screaming at a goat had hit over 1 million views. By the time the radio interview aired later that morning, someone had already created a parody account pretending to be Karen's SUV, complete with sassy captions like "Don't blame me, I just wanted to see the cows." What started as local gossip had become a full-blown internet phenomenon, and no matter how hard she tried to erase or rewrite the narrative, Karen was stuck in it. She was the unwilling star of a comedy she didn't write but helped direct through her arrogance and overconfidence. I woke up that morning to find my store's Facebook page flooded with supportive comments and tagged posts. Customers came in just to take selfies with the now famous loading zone. A retired couple drove from the next town over just to ask if the goat was available for photo op. One woman handed me a coffee and whispered, "You've done what every small business owner has dreamed of." I didn't feel like a hero, not exactly. But I did feel a strange sense of balance, like the universe had tilted in the right direction for once. Karen, on the other hand, was doubling down on her spiral. Her next move was as predictable as it was dramatic. She attempted to organize a community forum to discuss what she called the growing hostility toward women of class. The invitation, written in Comic Sans and sent to nearly every HOA member in town, described the livestock auction incident as a hate crime masked as rural comedy. She referred to the goat as a biohazard and claimed the event had traumatized her vehicle's navigation system. Most people thought it was satire until she followed up with a video of herself standing in front of her freshly cleaned SUV, looking somber and noble, saying the words "I refuse to be silenced by barnyard bigotry." Unfortunately for her, midway through the video a stray chicken wandered into frame, and her attempt at seriousness fell apart when she shrieked and bolted off screen. That clip went even more viral than the first one. The HOA meeting was held in a small community hall and packed beyond capacity. People weren't there to support Karen. They came for the spectacle. Karen stood in front of the podium, armed with a printed stack of social media screenshots and a poster board featuring blurry images of my store. She accused me of cyber harassment, property abuse, and livestock manipulation. I sat quietly near the back, sipping tea, waiting to see how far she'd take it. When she suggested the town should consider relocating my business to a more rural corner where trucks and tractors belong, I almost laughed out loud. That was when Mr. Delaney, the HOA's oldest member, leaned into the mic and said, "Ma'am, if you don't want to live near farmers, you might want to move out of a town named after one." Several members of the board tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't stop. She brought up screenshots of the memes, photoshopped images of her SUV with hay stuffed into the windows, and one particularly creative edit that made it look like her Range Rover had won a blue ribbon at the livestock auction. The entire room struggled to hold back laughter. When a board member asked her what resolution she was seeking, she demanded that I be fined for emotional vandalism and that the town issue a public apology. That's when someone in the back stood up and said, "If anyone owes an apology, it's the woman who's been blocking our loading zone for months." The room broke into applause. Karen stood there stunned, realizing she was no longer in control. She stormed out before the meeting ended, but not before someone handed her a small plastic goat figurine with a bow on it. That night, the memes intensified. A local artist painted a mural downtown depicting the infamous moment with Karen screaming and a goat smiling smugly beside her. The Range Rover had cartoon eyes, and above it was written in bold letters Lot 38. The legend. Tourists stopped to take pictures. Kids laughed as they posed next to the goat. My store got more foot traffic than ever. I even started selling t-shirts that said "Respect the Zone" with a silhouette of a goat under it. What started as a moment of revenge had become a rallying cry for the community. People were fed up with entitled behavior and drawn to the idea that someone had finally done something about it with a bit of humor and a lot of nerve. Karen tried one last desperate tactic. She recorded a Facebook Live video from inside her car, claiming that the constant ridicule had forced her to consider leaving town. She asked for donations to help her relocate to a place that respected luxury living and quiet reflection. But as she delivered her speech, the camera panned slightly and revealed the same goat from the auction casually grazing near her car again. Viewers lost it. The comments section was flooded with laughing emojis, goat gifs, and comments like "The goat's following her now, it's karma with Hoove." The video was shared by a national satire page, and by morning, Karen had gone from local drama queen to a trending topic. She shut down her account the next day. Despite all this, I never reached out to her directly. I didn't gloat, didn't taunt her, didn't send a single message. Part of me understood that this had grown far beyond our personal feud. She had made herself the villain by refusing to take responsibility, and the town had delivered its own justice. I didn't need to add fuel to the fire. Her silence and retreat were enough. In fact, the only message I received from her was anonymous, a poorly typed letter dropped in my store's mailbox with no signature. It read, "You may think you've won, but this town doesn't deserve people like you." I folded it and slipped it into the suggestion box we never used. The most unexpected part of the whole situation came a week later. A local journalist interviewed me again, this time for a piece titled How a Goat Became the Town's Greatest Teacher. They asked me if I planned the whole thing just for fame. I told them the truth. I didn't do it for attention. I did it because some people only learn respect the hard way. And sometimes poetic justice wears Hoove. They smiled and asked if there was any final message I had for viewers who might be watching this story unfold. I thought about it for a second and said only this: never underestimate what can happen when you block the wrong loading zone. Especially if it's near a goat. A year passed, and every time I glanced at that concrete rectangle outside my feed store, I couldn't help but smile. The loading zone was still there, freshly painted with crisp red lines and a new sign that read "No parking. Violators will be towed directly to the livestock auction." It had become a sort of landmark in town, a quiet monument to the day entitlement met consequence and got a goat for its trouble. Tourists sometimes stopped just to take photos, and every so often, a prankster would leave a rubber goat figurine sitting near the curb, staring solemnly at the spot like it was paying respects. Locals called it Lot 38 now. It wasn't just a parking space anymore. It was a story. Business had never been better. The viral videos, memes, and interviews had brought in a flood of curious customers and new regulars who genuinely loved the store's community feel. I expanded the inventory, added a little coffee corner, and even built a small wooden platform for school groups who visited on field trip. One teacher jokingly asked if I'd considered naming the spot the Karen Corner. I told her I liked the goat angle better. There was something peaceful in the way everything had settled. No malice, no ongoing feud, just the gentle fade of a story that had made people laugh and, somehow, brought a town closer. Karen, however, wasn't entirely gone. Word was she still lived across town, though she kept a much lower profile these days. Her SUV had been sold off. Whether she couldn't handle the association or the goat smell had truly embedded itself into the leather seats, I didn't know. She drove a modest gray sedan now, always parked within the lines, always facing the correct direction, and never anywhere near the feed store. Rumor had it she switched HOAs 3 times before settling in a neighborhood where no one mentioned the word auction. Some said she started seeing a therapist. Others joked the goat was her spirit animal now. I never saw her again in person, but I figured that was probably for the best. Some endings don't need a final scene. They just drift into legend. One afternoon, while restocking some seed bags near the front, a young girl approached me holding a sketchpad. She looked to be about 12, wearing overalls and a ponytail, with that sharp curiosity only kids have. She said her class had been assigned a project about local heroes and asked if she could draw me standing next to the goat from the video. I laughed and said sure, but only if she gave the goat sunglasses. She did. The sketch was surprisingly good. She handed it to me at the end, and at the bottom she'd written "Thank you for teaching our town that funny and kind is stronger than mean and loud." That drawing now hangs inside the store by the register, framed in old barnwood. It wasn't just kids who appreciated the story. Older farmers would drop in and share their own tales of run-ins with difficult people, how they wished they'd handled it with wit instead of temper. One told me he once chased a trespasser off with a shovel, then shook his head and said should have used a goat instead. My store had become something more than a place to buy feed. It was now a symbol of quiet resistance against entitled behavior. And I hadn't done it with yelling or threats. Just a tow truck, a clever plan, and a livestock auction that welcomed unexpected guests. One weekend, the town invited me to be a judge at the annual livestock fair. It wasn't a huge event, just a wholesome, dusty little fairground filled with animals, kids, local food stands, and the scent of funnel cake drifting in the wind. As I walked through the rows of pens, I heard someone call out Lot 38. I turned and saw a group of teens grinning and giving me a thumbs up. One of them wore a shirt with the goat standing on a Range Rover, haloed in sunlight like a saint. I didn't say anything, just smiled and tipped my hat. Later that day, the fair organizers asked me to present the ribbon for Best in Show. I took the mic, looked out at the cheerful crowd, and thought of something that felt right. I said sometimes the loudest people just need a quiet lesson, and sometimes the best lessons come from places with hooves. The crowd laughed, a few people clapped, and one little kid in the front yelled, "Bring out the goat." That got the loudest cheer of the day. I walked off stage feeling something I hadn't expected to feel after all this, a weird kind of gratitude. Not for Karen's actions, of course, but for the bizarre chain of events she set off. Her stubbornness had given the town a story. Her tantrum gave us something to laugh about. And her refusal to admit fault reminded people that ego has a price. I didn't hate her. In fact, I hoped she'd learn something too. Maybe she was happier now, quieter, less obsessed with control. Or maybe she still saw goats in her nightmares. Either way, the chapter had closed. The final surprise came months later when a national TV program reached out asking to feature the story. They wanted to do a segment on creative problem-solving in small towns. I hesitated at first, not wanting to stir old drama, but they promised it would be tasteful. They flew in with a tiny crew, filmed the store, the infamous loading zone, and even recreated part of the goat scene using a very patient stunt goat named Harold. I stood in front of the camera and told the whole tale, from the first block delivery to the viral explosion. They aired it a few weeks later. The title was simple and perfect: The Day Entitlement Got Towed. That same week, I got a small package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a miniature toy SUV, covered in hay, with a little plastic goat glued to the roof. No note. Just the image. I laughed harder than I had in months. Whoever sent it, they understood. And that was the best part of the whole saga. People didn't need every detail or a formal explanation. They just needed the image, the memory, the laugh. It was a story told with horns and hooves, played out in front of auctioneers and goats, and echoed across phones and back porches. It wasn't just about a Karen anymore. It was about standing up, smartly and humorously, when someone tries to bulldoze your space. The town still talks about it from time to time, mostly with affection. And every once in a while, a new Karen tries to test the rules. They park crooked or complain about the smell of feed. But all I have to do is point to the sign on the loading zone and say, "You really don't want to be lot 38. They move. Every single time. And the goats? Well, they're still nearby. Still chewing on fence posts and occasionally, if they feel frisky, giving a gentle nudge to anyone who gets too close to the wrong part of town.